The afternoon was warm, and the streets were busy with people rushing to get to where they needed to be. Some walked with their eyes on their phones, others hurried with bags in their hands, and cars honked in the distance. In the middle of all this noise, a young man walked with a sense of urgency. His shirt was slightly wrinkled, and he carried a folder under his arm. He had been preparing for an important interview, one that he hoped would finally help him turn his life around. He had been struggling for months, doing odd jobs, skipping meals at times, and holding on to the hope that something better was waiting for him if he just kept trying. As he moved quickly down the street, his eyes caught sight of an elderly man a few steps ahead. The old man was in a wheelchair, and something about the way he was struggling caught the young man's attention. The wheel looked jammed, and the chair wasn't moving. People passed by without slowing down, some glancing for a second before looking away, others acting as if they didn't even notice. The old man tried to adjust the chair himself, his frail hands trembling slightly as he bent to reach the side of the wheel. He looked helpless in the middle of the sidewalk, and though dozens of people walked past him, no one stopped. The young man felt torn. He knew he had to reach his interview soon. This was his one chance to prove himself. But as he looked at the old man's face, he saw more than just frustration. There was a quiet sadness there, the kind that comes when someone feels invisible. The young man slowed his steps, his heart pressing him in a direction his mind was trying to resist. Finally, he took a deep breath, tucked the folder under his arm, and walked toward the old man. "Do you need some help, sir?" the young man asked softly. The old man looked up, startled for a moment. His eyes studied the young man as if he hadn't expected anyone to stop. "This chair," he said, his voice low but steady, "it's stuck. I can't get it to move." The young man knelt beside the wheelchair and looked closer. The wheel had come loose from its frame, making it impossible to roll forward. He pressed his fingers against the metal and gave it a gentle push, but it wouldn't budge. "It looks like it needs fixing," he said, glancing up at the old man. "I think I can take care of it, but it might take some time." "You don't have to trouble yourself," the old man replied. "I'll figure something out." The young man shook his head. "No one should be stuck out here like this," he said. "Let me help." He stood up and looked around. There was a small hardware shop a few feet away, and he rushed inside to ask if they had any tools he could borrow. The shopkeeper hesitated at first, but handed him a wrench and a screwdriver. The young man thanked him and hurried back. He knelt down again, carefully loosening the wheel and adjusting the bolts. His shirt became stained with grease as he worked, but he didn't mind. He was focused, determined to get it right. The old man watched him quietly. "You seem to know what you're doing," he said after a while. The young man smiled faintly. "Not really," he admitted. "I just fix things when I have to. My father used to say you don't need to be an expert to help someone. You just need to try." Minutes turned into half an hour, and then nearly an hour. Sweat formed on the young man's forehead as he struggled with the stubborn wheel. Several people glanced their way, but still no one else offered to help. It was just the two of them on that busy street, one working hard to repair a broken chair, the other waiting patiently, his eyes full of curiosity. Finally, after tightening the last bolt, the young man gave the wheel a push. It spun smoothly, turning the way it should. He stood up, wiped his hands on his pants, and smiled. "There," he said. "Good as new." The old man pressed his hands against the wheels, testing them. The chair rolled forward with ease. For the first time since they had met, the old man's lips curved into a warm smile. "You fixed it," he said. "I didn't think anyone would stop, let alone spend this much time." The young man shrugged, brushing the dust off his hands. "I couldn't just walk past," he said. "I'd want someone to do the same for me if I were in your place." The old man reached into his pocket and pulled out a few bills. "Take this," he said. "It's the least I can do." The young man shook his head firmly. "No, sir," he said. "I don't want money. I only wanted to help." The old man looked at him closely, as if trying to understand why someone would turn down an easy reward. "At least tell me your name," he said. The young man hesitated, then gave a small smile. "It doesn't matter," he said softly. "Just think of me as someone passing by." Before the old man could say anything more, the young man returned the tools to the shop and walked away quickly. His folder was still under his arm, but when he checked the time, his heart sank. The interview was long over. He stopped for a moment, leaning against a wall, and let out a deep sigh. He knew what that meant, another missed opportunity. Another door closed. Still, as he thought about the old man's smile when the wheelchair rolled again, he felt a strange sense of peace. Maybe he had missed his chance, but at least he had done the right thing. Behind him, the old man sat quietly in his chair, watching the young man disappear into the crowd. His eyes lingered with thought as if he saw something in the young man that others had missed. The city kept moving, people rushing by, but for a moment, time felt slower for both of them. The old man gave the wheels another turn and nodded to himself, a look of quiet satisfaction crossing his face. The young man, meanwhile, kept walking, his steps slower now. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring. He only knew that, for today, he had helped someone who needed it. And though he didn't realize it yet, that choice would shape his life in ways he couldn't imagine. The young man woke up the next morning with mixed feelings. The interview he had missed weighed heavily on his mind. He had prepared for weeks, gathering every bit of confidence he could. Losing that chance left him restless, and he wondered if he had made a mistake choosing to help instead of hurrying on. Yet when he remembered the old man's face lighting up after the wheelchair was fixed, a sense of calm replaced his regret. Deep down, he felt he had done what was right. His life, however, was still difficult. He lived in a small rented room with little furniture, just enough to get by. Each day was a challenge, finding temporary jobs, doing errands for neighbors, carrying boxes for shopkeepers, or sometimes working late in small cafes for a few coins. It was never steady, but it kept him afloat. He kept telling himself that something better would come, that all his effort would not be in vain. That afternoon, as he walked back from a short delivery job, he passed the same street where he had seen the old man. The spot was empty now, just people walking as usual, cars honking as they always did. For a moment, he wondered where the old man might be. Was he safe? Did the chair still work fine? The thought stayed in his mind longer than he expected. Later that evening, he sat at a small tea stall, sipping from a glass and staring at the crowd. The stall was filled with chatter, people discussing work, families, and plans. He listened quietly, his thoughts drifting back to the old man. He didn't know why, but he felt as though their paths hadn't crossed for the last time. The next few days passed quickly. The young man continued looking for work, submitting applications wherever he could. He faced rejection after rejection, yet he refused to give up. He knew he had little to offer besides his determination, but sometimes determination was all a person needed to keep moving forward. Then, on the fourth day after fixing the wheelchair, something unexpected happened. He was walking home when his phone rang. The number was unfamiliar. He considered ignoring it, thinking it might be a wrong call, but something urged him to answer. "Hello?" he said cautiously. A firm but polite voice spoke on the other end. "Good evening. Are you the young man who helped repair a wheelchair earlier this week?" The young man's heart skipped. "Yes," he said after a pause. "But how did you get my number?" "You left your contact at the hardware shop when you borrowed tools," the voice explained. "The gentleman you assisted would like to meet you again. Could you come to the address we'll send you?" The young man froze. Why would the old man want to see him again? He hadn't expected anything beyond that moment on the street. Still, curiosity filled him. He agreed to meet, and a message with the address arrived soon after. The following morning, he put on his cleanest clothes, though they were still modest compared to others. He brushed his hair neatly, held his worn-out folder just in case, and made his way to the address. When he arrived, he was stunned. The building was tall and elegant, made of glass and stone, towering above the busy street. People in suits walked in and out with purpose, their expressions sharp and professional. The young man hesitated, feeling out of place. Could this really be where the old man wanted to meet him? Gathering courage, he stepped inside. The lobby was grand with polished floors and quiet lighting. A receptionist greeted him and guided him toward an elevator. His hands grew clammy as the doors closed and the elevator rose. He wondered what he was walking into. The higher the elevator went, the more nervous he became. Finally, the doors opened to a wide floor with a view of the entire city. Waiting there, surrounded by a few assistants, was the same old man. Except now he looked very different. His clothes were sharp and expensive, his posture strong, his presence commanding. The wheelchair was there too, but the air around him was not of helplessness, it was of authority. The young man's mouth went dry. He walked slowly toward the old man, unsure of what to say. The old man's eyes softened when he saw him. "There you are," he said warmly. "I was hoping you'd come." The young man bowed his head slightly, still confused. I didn't expect this, he admitted. I thought I'd never see you again. The old man smiled. Most people who passed me that day didn't even look twice. But you stopped. You stayed. You gave your time and effort without asking for anything in return. Do you know how rare that is? The young man shook his head slowly. I just did what anyone should have done. The old man chuckled softly. If that were true, I wouldn't have been sitting there so long before you came along. One of the assistants leaned down to whisper something in the old man's ear, but he waved him off, keeping his focus on the young man. Do you know where you are right now? He asked. The young man looked around at the grand office. It looks like a company's headquarters, he said carefully. That's correct, the old man replied. This company is mine. The words hit the young man like a wave. He blinked in disbelief, unsure if he had heard correctly. Yours? He asked quietly. Yes, the old man said with a nod. I built it from nothing many years ago. Today it stands as one of the biggest in the city. People know me as a business leader, an investor, a mogul if you will, but when I'm on the streets in that chair, no one sees that. They only see an old man who can't walk, and in that moment they show who they truly are. The young man's chest tightened. He hadn't realized what that moment meant. He thought he was just helping a stranger. Now it felt much bigger. The old man leaned forward slightly. Tell me, why did you stop that day even when it cost you something important? The young man hesitated before speaking honestly. Because I couldn't walk past. I thought about what it would feel like to be left alone, and I couldn't do that to you. I missed something I needed, but I knew I'd feel worse if I didn't help. The old man studied him closely, his expression thoughtful. Then he smiled again, a slow, genuine smile. That's exactly what I wanted to know. The young man shifted uneasily. He still didn't understand why he was here or what the old man wanted from him. But he could feel something stirring in the air, as if this meeting was about to change his life in a way he couldn't yet see. The young man stood quietly in front of the old man, still trying to process what he had just heard. The office was wide and bright, and the hum of the city below felt distant, almost unreal. He shifted on his feet, unsure of whether he belonged in such a place. The old man's assistants stayed a short distance away, their expressions neutral but watchful, as if they were used to moments like these. The old man, however, looked only at him with a calm but piercing gaze. You don't need to be nervous, the old man said kindly. I called you here because I wanted to speak to you in a proper setting. Out there on the street, I was just another person in need. But here you see another side of me. The young man nodded slowly, though his nerves did not fade. I don't really understand why I'm here, he admitted. I was only helping. I didn't expect anything in return. The old man leaned back in his chair, his hands resting on the arms of the wheelchair. That's the point, he said. You gave your time without expecting anything. That kind of heart is rare. Most people walk past thinking only of themselves. But you stopped. You stayed. Even when you had somewhere important to be, you chose kindness first. That says a lot about who you are. The young man lowered his eyes, feeling both humbled and embarrassed. He wasn't used to being praised like this. He thought about how hard life had been, how he had struggled to find work, and how often he felt invisible. And yet in that moment, this powerful man was speaking to him as if his actions carried great weight. I missed my interview that day, the young man said quietly. It was something I had been waiting for, but I couldn't just leave you there. I thought I'd ruin my chance at a better life. The old man tilted his head. Maybe you didn't ruin it, he said. Maybe you found another path. The young man looked up, confused. What do you mean? The old man smiled faintly. I've lived long enough to know that life doesn't always reward us the way we expect. Sometimes when you think you've lost an opportunity, you've actually gained something much bigger. That day was not a mistake. That day was the beginning of something. The young man didn't know how to reply. His hands tightened around the folder he carried, though the papers inside now seemed unimportant compared to the weight of the moment. The old man gestured toward a chair nearby. Sit, he said gently. We have time to talk. The young man sat down, his shoulders stiff, trying to calm the racing of his heart. He glanced around the room, noticing framed photographs on the wall, pictures of factories, gatherings of workers, and moments from long ago. The old man's life seemed to stretch across decades, marked by both struggle and success. Do you know why I sometimes go out in this chair, looking as if I have no one to help me? The old man asked. The young man shook his head. No, sir. Because it shows me the truth about people, the old man explained. When I appear strong and wealthy, people come close with smiles, but their eyes are on what they can gain. When I appear weak and forgotten, most turn away. Only a few reveal their true hearts. That day, you revealed yours. The young man listened carefully, the words settling deep inside him. He had never thought about kindness as something that could be tested. To him, helping had simply been the right thing to do. The old man leaned forward slightly. Tell me about yourself. Where do you live? What do you do? The young man hesitated but spoke honestly. He told the old man about his small rented room, his search for steady work, the odd jobs he did to keep himself going. He spoke of the responsibilities he carried, of how he had little but still tried to stay hopeful. He didn't hide his struggles. He simply laid them out as they were. The old man listened without interrupting, his eyes steady, his expression thoughtful. When the young man finished, there was a silence in the room, broken only by the faint sound of traffic below. You've had it hard, the old man said at last, but you haven't let it turn you bitter. That matters more than you know. The young man gave a small nod, though he didn't know what else to say. He wasn't sure what the old man saw in him, but he felt a strange warmth in being heard, truly heard after so long. After a pause, the old man spoke again. What if I told you that I want you to work with me? The young man blinked, certain he had misheard. Work with you? He repeated. Yes, the old man said calmly. Not because you fixed a chair, but because you showed me something that money cannot buy. I can train anyone in business. I can teach skills, I can give resources, but I cannot create a good heart in someone. You already have that. And that is what I value most. The young man's mind raced. The offer seemed unreal. He had come here expecting nothing, perhaps just a thank you. Now he was being offered something he couldn't fully grasp. I don't know if I'm the right person, the young man said honestly. I don't have experience. I don't know how things work in a place like this. The old man smiled knowingly. You'll learn. Everyone starts somewhere. What matters is that you're willing. And from what I've seen, you are. The young man sat in silence, his heart pounding. 1,000 doubts swirled in his head. But beneath them was a spark of hope, brighter than anything he had felt in a long time. He looked at the old man, seeing not just a powerful figure, but someone who had looked past his worn clothes, his simple life, and seen value in him. You don't have to answer now, the old man said gently. Think about it. Come back tomorrow if you're ready. The young man nodded slowly, his voice catching slightly as he replied, Thank you. Truly. As he left the office, his legs felt light and heavy at the same time. The world outside looked the same, people rushing, cars honking. But to him, everything had changed. He walked down the busy street, the noise around him fading as his thoughts grew louder. He had been offered a chance not because of his qualifications or his appearance, but because of something simple he had almost overlooked, his choice to stop, to care, to help. He didn't know where this path would lead, but for the first time in a long while, he felt that maybe his kindness had not been just a small act lost in the world. Maybe it had been the key to something much greater waiting ahead. The young man spent that night restless. He lay on his small bed staring at the ceiling, his mind racing in circles. The old man's words replayed again and again. I want you to work with me. It felt almost unreal, like something out of a dream. He thought about how only a few days ago he had been worrying about missed interviews and wondering how long he could survive on odd jobs. Now, a powerful man had seen something in him that he himself had never thought would matter. He questioned whether he was truly ready. He didn't have fancy clothes or a polished degree. He had no special skills that would impress anyone in such a grand office. All he had was his willingness to work and his heart to do right by people. Would that be enough? Could kindness really open doors in a world that seemed to value only money and status? Morning came quickly, and though his doubts lingered, a sense of quiet determination pushed him forward. He knew he couldn't let fear keep him from stepping into a chance that might never come again. He put on his cleanest shirt, smoothed it down with trembling hands, and walked out the door. When he arrived at the building again, it still felt intimidating. The tall glass walls reflected the sky, and the steady flow of suited workers made him feel small. Yet this time he entered with more courage. The receptionist recognized him and guided him upstairs. The old man was waiting in the same office, sunlight streaming in behind him. His face brightened slightly when he saw the young man walk in. You came, he said warmly. The young man nodded, his voice steady, though his heart pounded. I thought about what you said. If you're still offering, I'd like to accept. The old man's eyes softened. Good, he replied. Then let's begin. From that day, the young man entered a new chapter of his life. His first tasks were simple: shadowing assistants, carrying documents, observing meetings quietly. At first, he felt out of place. The workers around him spoke with polished words, wore sharp suits, and carried themselves with confidence. He, on the other hand, still wore plain clothes and kept to himself, afraid of standing out for the wrong reasons. But the old man often reminded him, "You are not here because of what you wear or what you know yet. You are here because of who you are. Everything else can be learned." With those words, the young man focused on listening and learning. He watched how decisions were made, how problems were solved, how leaders treated their teams. He noticed the differences. Some people barked orders, while others guided with patience. Some worked only for recognition, while others worked for the success of everyone. Slowly, he began to understand that success wasn't just about profit or power. It was about trust, respect, and fairness. One afternoon, while sorting papers, he overheard two workers arguing. One was upset about being overlooked for a promotion, while the other defended the management. The young man didn't mean to listen, but their words struck him. He realized that even in such a powerful place, people still carried frustrations, doubts, and struggles. It reminded him that no matter the setting, humans remained human. Days turned into weeks. The young man worked quietly but diligently. Whenever he was given a task, he did it with care. If someone needed help, he offered it without hesitation. Some of the workers noticed and began to trust him, asking him for small favors or advice. Though he was still new, his sincerity stood out in a world where many were focused only on themselves. One day, the old man called him into the office privately. "You've been here a short time, but I've seen how you carry yourself," he said. "You remind me of myself when I was younger." The young man's eyes widened. "Me, but you've achieved so much." "I don't think I could ever compare." The old man chuckled softly. "When I started, I had nothing. Just like you. I didn't know the rules of business. I didn't have experience. All I had was the will to work hard and the choice to treat people with respect. That's what built this place. Not money alone, not connections alone, but the belief that people matter. And you understand that already." The young man listened closely, his chest tightening with both pride and humility. He didn't know how to respond, but the old man's words felt like a promise that his kindness truly did have value. Not long after, the young man was asked to assist in a small project. It wasn't a big one, but it was his first real responsibility. He was nervous, afraid of making mistakes, but he poured his effort into it. He stayed late, checked every detail twice, and sought guidance whenever he felt unsure. When the project was completed, it went smoothly, and the team thanked him for his effort. The old man heard about it and called him in again. "You did well," he said. "Do you see now? You belong here." The young man felt a smile spread across his face. For the first time in a long while, he believed those words. Still, there were challenges. Some people in the company doubted him. They whispered behind his back, questioning why someone with no degree or polished background was given a chance by the boss himself. He overheard the comments at times, and though they stung, he tried not to let them discourage him. He reminded himself of what the old man had said. Skills could be learned, but heart could not. One evening, as he was about to leave, he saw a cleaner struggling to carry a heavy cart of supplies. Many employees walked past without a glance. The young man rushed forward, offering to push the cart alongside him. The cleaner looked surprised but grateful. "You don't have to do this," he said. "I know," the young man replied with a smile. "But I want to." The old man, passing through the hallway at that very moment, noticed the scene. He didn't say anything then, but later he told the young man, "Never lose that. That willingness to help, even when no one's watching, that is what makes you different." The weeks grew into months, and slowly, the young man's life began to change. He no longer worried about skipping meals. He was able to pay his rent on time, even send a little money to family who needed it. But beyond the money, it was the dignity that meant the most to him. He walked each day with purpose, no longer feeling invisible in the world. Every evening he reflected on how far he had come in such a short time. All because he had stopped one day on a busy street, choosing to help instead of hurrying by. That single decision had led him to a place he had never imagined. surrounded by opportunities he once thought were impossible. And though he was grateful, he also knew one thing clearly: this was only the beginning. There was still much to learn, much to prove, and much to give back. But for the first time he felt ready to walk the path ahead, guided not by fear but by the simple truth that kindness could change everything. Months passed, and the young man's life began to look very different from the one he had known before. He still lived simply, still wore the same modest clothes, and still carried himself without pride. But inside something had changed. He woke up each morning with a sense of purpose. For the first time in his life, he wasn't just surviving from one day to the next, he was building something. Working alongside the old man's team was not always easy. There were moments of doubt, mistakes he made, and challenges that tested his patience. But every time he stumbled, he reminded himself of why he was there. He remembered the words that had been told to him again and again: skills could be taught, but kindness could not. That truth gave him strength. The old man often invited him to sit in on important meetings, not just to watch, but to learn. The young man paid close attention, not only to the numbers and charts, but to the way people spoke, the way decisions were made, and the way respect was earned. Sometimes, after a long meeting, the old man would ask, "What did you notice today?" The young man would share his thoughts, and though they were simple, they often carried an honesty that surprised even the most experienced workers. One evening, after a long day, the old man and the young man sat together in the quiet office. The city lights shimmered through the tall windows. The old man leaned back in his chair, his voice calm. "You've grown a lot since the day we met," he said. "Do you see it in yourself?" The young man thought for a moment. "I feel different," he admitted. "I used to think I was invisible. Now I feel like maybe I can make a difference even in small ways." The old man smiled. "That is the greatest change of all. Not the money, not the title, but the belief that you matter. Never lose that." The young man nodded, his heart full. He knew he would carry those words with him for the rest of his life. In time, the young man's responsibilities grew. He was trusted with projects, asked to speak with teams, and slowly became someone others looked to for guidance. Some of the same people who once doubted him now respected him, not because he had become the smartest in the room, but because he treated everyone with fairness and care. He never forgot what it felt like to be overlooked, and so he made sure no one under his watch felt unseen. One day, while walking through the busy office, he noticed a young intern struggling with a task. The boy looked frustrated, on the verge of tears. The young man stopped, knelt beside him, and offered quiet encouragement. Together, they went through the work step by step until the boy understood. When the boy finally smiled in relief, the young man felt a warmth in his chest. He saw himself in that boy, lost, unsure, just needing someone to believe in him. And in that moment, he realized how far he had come. The old man, who had been watching from a distance, later said, "You are becoming what I hoped you would, a leader, not because of power, but because of heart." Seasons changed, and with them the young man's life continued to blossom. He was able to move into a better home, one where he no longer worried about leaks or cold nights. He sent money to family, ensuring they had enough to eat, enough to live with dignity. He even began to save, something he once thought impossible. Yet through all these changes, he remained humble. He still greeted the doorman every morning, still helped the cleaner when he saw him struggling, and still gave his time to anyone who needed it. The old man, though strong in spirit, grew older with each passing day. The young man noticed it quietly, the slower movements, the longer pauses. One evening, after most workers had left, the old man spoke to him in a voice both firm and gentle. "One day I will no longer sit in this chair in this office," he said. "When that day comes, I want to know that this place and the people in it will be in good hands. Hands like yours." The young man was stunned. "Me? But there are so many people here with more experience." "Experience without kindness is empty," the old man replied. "I can train anyone in skills. I cannot teach them to care. You already have what matters most." The weight of those words pressed deeply into the young man's heart. He realized then that the old man had not only given him a job, he had given him trust, belief, and a chance to rise higher than he had ever dreamed. Years later, the young man would look back at that single moment on the street, the day he chose to stop and help a stranger in a wheelchair. He would remember the way others walked past, the way he almost walked past too, and the choice that changed everything. That small act of compassion had shaped the course of his life. It had opened doors no resume ever could, built bridges no money could buy, and brought him into the life he had once thought was out of reach. He never stopped helping. Whether it was guiding a nervous worker, supporting a struggling family, or offering kindness to a stranger, he carried with him the lesson that had started it all. One act of kindness can echo far beyond what we see. The old man often reminded him, even in his later years, remember where you came from, remember why you are here, and never stop being the person who stops to help. The young man promised he never would, and he kept that promise. Even as his life grew brighter, even as he gained respect and responsibility, he remained the same at heart, the young man who chose compassion over convenience. The one who bent down on a crowded street to fix a broken wheel, not knowing that in doing so he was also fixing the course of his own future. And so, his story became more than just his own. It became a reminder for everyone around him that kindness, even the smallest kind, has the power to change lives in ways we can never imagine.